Welcome back to the Life of Tash Mia. I'm Tash. Today I'm really excited to have Quinn Kush, the founder of Tendercore, which is a queer-focused movement centered on intimacy and pleasure artistry. The initiative promotes self-care, community connection, creative expression, and sexual liberation, aiming to help individuals reclaim their sense of aliveness and pleasure. Through various sessions, events, and commitment to advocacy, Tendercore seeks to challenge societal norms surrounding sexuality, while fostering a deeper connection to one's body and desires. Welcome, Quinn. It's lovely to have you here.
Hey, very excited. That was an incredible bio. Hell yes.
You are doing a lot in the space, it seems. But first, I'd love you just to share with us what exactly is a pleasure artist.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Being a pleasure artist, it really has no boundaries. I think art, a lot of the time, is about getting things that are in the invisible and bringing them into the visible. And we can say the same thing about pleasure. You know, people are searching for it. Where is it? Where is it? It's invisible and we want to bring it to the surface. So for me, I think a lot of the time, sex and pleasure can be really daunting. So to do it in this way that is digestible and fun and unique and creative, I think a lot of healing can happen in that space. And it's very, it's a lot more playful. So for me, pleasure artistry is about creating events and concepts that evoke sensation, that evoke people to question their pleasure. I do different sensory meditations, different wide-scale events that evoke pleasure, including just my sessions, which have a lot to do with creating art out of the client and making art together.
That's beautiful. I love that, making art together. What would just a session look like? Just out of like, if someone's thinking, okay, what is pleasure artistry? What would I experience going to a session with you?
So the session with me has a lot to do with really meeting that person where they're at. The different sessions can be different things. So for instance, sometimes people think that to connect with their pleasure or sex, they need to be in, P and V, intercourse, sex. And a lot of the time I want to strip it all the way back and start with things that just are edgy to that person. So pleasure artistry could be doing a photo shoot, having a photo shoot, creating art together, having an intention and having that come to fruition. It could also be, a session more intimately in the massage space where I am using different tools, sprays, smells, igniting different sensory experiences, drumming on people's bodies, wrapping them up, feeding them different things. That is definitely a part of the sessions. And then the sessions can also go a lot deeper in helping people to lean into a safer space of intimacy and pleasure within themselves. Not just massage itself, but real devotional worship, ancient artistic devotion that we see from the olden days. I would say worship is a part of artistry as well.
I love that you said you have maybe a toolbox and then you use the appropriate tools for the client. Is it easy to decipher what client needs what tools, or is it something you feel? How do you actually decide what someone needs?
Yeah, definitely. Again, this is very much about where the client is at, meeting them where they're at, depending on the amount of, trauma that they've had, and also what they want for the session. Some people walk in and they just want to be able to close their eyes in front of someone in a semi-erotic space. Other people are other workers who are looking to deepen in their ability to receive or separate from work and their own pleasure. So I really get people to attempt to have multiple sessions so we can work together and just take it energetically as it sort of comes. And work with that rolling consent, work with breaking down the barriers to create as much safety as possible to enable each person to get just one more reference point for how much more safer they can feel in their bodies.
What actually led you to start Tendercore? What was your journey in creating this? Because it's really unique. To be honest, I've never heard of really anyone doing something like this. So what actually led you to create it?
Thank you. So Upon being a worker and cultivating these sessions that I've cultivating, which I think are already very outside of what a regular kind of sex worker sort of does, I'm sort of in this hybrid of sexology, sex coaching, and worker energy and artistry, where it enabled me to be in lots of sex-oriented spaces, BDSM spaces, gay saunas, including also kind of tantric spaces, more spiritual spaces in that regard. And I just was doing all of this kind of research around all of these spaces and really just recognizing that if people wanted to lean into working on their sexuality or being in sex-positive spaces, it felt like a very big leap to step into some spaces. And although I know there's a lot of tenderness in those spaces, and I know that it's not all just whipping and leather and chains, and it's actually not as scary at all as what you perceive it to be once you're in there. But if you're someone that hasn't been in there, it can be very confronting. And for me also, a lot of the time where I'm having my sessions or I'm going into these spaces, I'm not actually desiring to hook up and have sexual experiences with people. I'm actually really craving to have intimacy with people. I was really craving to just be held, to be nurtured, to be stroked, to be in that kind of lower BPM energy, to really just create comfortability before then going into having a sexual experience. So for me, Tendercore was about basically creating my own modality of kink that focuses on all of the in-between stuff, that focuses on the co-regulation, that focuses on the nurturing, that focuses on being turned on and juiced up by the slowness and the connectedness and the softness.
I love so many aspects of what you said. Firstly, I love that you say it's like almost like a stepping stone for people who aren't ready to kind of fully immerse themselves into whatever kink modality they may be interested in, because it can be, as you said, a big leap. And I am probably similar to you. To me, it's not a big deal to go to a sex party. It's not a big deal to go to a kink party. But for a lot of people, it is. And they're not ready to kind of maybe throw themselves in there. So it's lovely to think that you can create this space to be like a stepping stone for someone to ease themselves into that. Also about, I love the slowness and the softness and warming yourself up. I was just having this conversation today actually about, when you are going to have like sex with someone and they're just trying to go straight into it. I'm even sometimes with my like husband, I'm like, I'm not even warm yet, so don't even go near that. Like you need to warm the engine up first. And because I won't do it anymore. I'm like, we all are like, oh, I'm just raring to go today. I'm already warmed up because I warmed myself up. But some days you're like, no, like I want to go there, but I'm not ready yet.
Yes.
So I love that you bring that softness and slowness, and it doesn't always have to lead to sex. It could just be being touched. And I think people sometimes stress out or maybe don't go to things because I think that is the expectation that you have to go to full-blown sex. Do you find that a lot of people come with that fear that like, I don't want to go to X space, or I don't want to be in this situation with the person because I'm worried about the expectation that it has to go to full-blown sex?
Yes, 100%. I love this question. There's so many layers to it. Firstly, when I first started doing this, I started off as an erotic masseuse, and then I've changed myself to a sensual masseuse just to really soften and take away a lot more of that nervousness. Most people that book in sessions, one-on-one sessions, or to come to the Tendercore touch portals are really nervous because I think as a society, because sex has become so taboo, we've grouped it in with just touch as well. And you think about it, when we're born, we need touch to stay alive. That is what keeps us alive, is that connection in a human way. And as, time goes on, touch becomes sexualized, or we've had violations in some description that's allowed us to become unsafe in our bodies. So all of a sudden, there's all this taboo sex stuff then tied also into just touch. It's the same thing about pleasure. People think like pleasure, oh my God, touching myself and masturbating. And okay, no, it's actually just what feels good. And so a lot of the concepts of what I do is to create a safe space where we get to just take away anything sex related, and we bring it back to platonic, and we bring it back to, okay, just come and see how you feel. You can just watch, you can just witness, and we take away any of the stress of this kind of sexual aspect of things, and we bring it back just to human touch. What type of touch do you like? You know, sensory. If you don't want to actually be involved, you can just witness, do life drawing, watch people, have a conversation, talk about something. Also, just talking about sex things is uncomfortable for people. So that might be your edge. So yes, I have lots of people who are really nervous about it. And especially now that I'm doing these more group experiences, I'm creating these Tendercore touch portals, which are play parties, but no penetration and focused on platonic touch. There's also a big push for sensual touch as well, which I think can happen really naturally and is also very softcore, to just bring people all the way back. And really a part of the Tendercore experience, the touch portal, and a lot of what I'm doing is to take away this heteronormative narrative of just this straightaway kind of hard, fast sex experience.
Yeah, like, because what I was just imagining, you're right, we kind of have this scale of like, no touch, it's too sexualized, too full-blown penetration. It's like there's so much in between those things. And especially, you know, you mentioned how important touch is. And I think, you know, COVID wasn't that long ago where we were isolated, no one was touching, we had masks, everyone was washing their hands. Touch has still become less and less. And as you said, it's so important for humans to have touch. And we're probably living in an era where it's probably never been less.
It's really hardcore how much COVID has affected us. Also, just with the rise in tech and social media and everything, we've replaced a lot of our relationships with the phone. And I think also due to the state of the world is really intense. You know, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of late stage capitalism, a lot of internalized capitalism, which means that we don't prioritize rest and we don't prioritize our own sense of intimacy. And we don't prioritize our self-care. And so it means lots of people are out there with no tools, dysregulated, disembodied, walking around just in this, ruminating in this, I'm going to be alone, you know, ruminating in this, fuck, I need a partner to hold me, to help me, kind of shit fuckery that everyone's just walking around in, and it's leaving people feeling more dissatisfied than ever, more alone than ever. And I think then in turn craving spaces like this more than ever.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, you mentioned relationship anarchy. I love that idea, but like shake up this traditional sense of what a relationship is. How did you come up with this? What does it mean to you?
Amazing. Yes, I've never felt as seen as what I felt when I found relationship anarchy. And it might be a new concept to people because it is actually, the term is only really 20 years old. Relationship anarchy is very much just about creating your relationships as you want them to be. So we can circle back to getting rid of this heteronormative narrative. And you can still be hetero and want to be with your partner and want to have children and a house and all these things that society is asking of you, as well as pulling apart your relationships. So it's about getting creative with your relationships. At the moment, I think that the world centers their romantic relationships to be above than any other relationships. And that's kind of what society tells us. And you'll be happy and whole if you have this thing. Whereas for me, I like to prioritize all of my relationships. I see my friends as lovers. I have queer platonic life partners. I haven't had like a girlfriend, a partner in 6 or 7 years. And if I hadn't invested in my community and my friends, and they hadn't invested in me in the way that I have and that they have, I would just be probably dead.
Yeah.
And so relationship anarchy is really about not having a hierarchy in your relationships and knowing that there is a universe in each relationship. And instead of just plugging into one person and giving that person then 80% of your energy and being in this back forth slog of ownership and jealousy and, these rules that have just been created for us from, God knows where, just settler colonialism and general colonization of fitting everyone into what they should do. This is a way to completely rewrite that. and to then center yourself as, I'd say, your number one relationship, but also then create more community based on where each person thrives. For me, also growing up as a queer person, it's never looked, the same way as other people, in a sense of like, I'm going to wear a wedding dress and I'm going to walk down the aisle and my Prince Charming, and then I'll have a house. And it's never looked like that. It's always, looked like, okay, yeah, I'll have a partner and maybe it'll be one of my best friends who's a guy that will donate the sperm, or maybe it'll be, two gay guys who I have a connection with and we'll raise it together, or maybe I'll have a joint bank account with my best friend because they are better at doing my admin than me. It's very much just about creating it to be, relationships to be what you want. And I think if we can do that, it's a form of lifestyle politics, and it's a form of, not putting these square pegs in round holes. And I think it has a lot to do with radical intimacy, which I think we really need in the world.
I've always said you shouldn't get all your needs met by one person. It's so unrealistic. And the fact that society has kind of built, the traditional marriage to be that, when originally marriage wasn't even that concept. It was never romantic. It was more, as you said, like the swapping of land or ownership or uniting families or whatever it was. It was never seen as a romantic thing and that person would be your everything. Plus, we were all come from communities and tribes, where you got your needs met by a community. And I often say, I really don't like the way we raise children these days. You're meant to, the traditional idea is a woman is meant to be alone at home in a house by herself raising a child, and they expect her not to go batshit crazy because it would have been a community raising that child. And I'm like, the way we live is just completely, to me, backwards. And we wonder why people are struggling. And you're right, people are struggling with intimacy because we're not used to it anymore. And if we are, we think it should be just from one person. So I love that idea of, create your own rules. It's definitely what I have done in my relationship. We always say we write our own rules. And I think this is where I'm not anti-monogamous or anything. I do think you can, if you want to be monogamous, practice it. But I think E&M or open or people who live an alternative relationship have a little bit of an advantage because we don't have the rules written. Do you know what I mean? Which means you write your own rules. Well, I think if you do go into that traditional monogamous society, Western idea, you have the rules already written for you and people don't question it. Because when I go into a relationship, when I meet someone, we come up with our rules. Literally, that was one of when me and my now husband decided to become serious, we set the rules for our open relationship. When have you ever done that in a normal monogamous relationship and sat down at the beginning and say, what are our rules? You just don't do it. So, yeah. Can you share some personal experiences that have shaped your views on sexuality?
Yeah, wow. Okay, so some personal experiences. I guess just going into this type of work, generally, you are automatically in kind of like a shame university, beginning in thinking about going into erotic photography, which is where I sort of began. And okay, where's the step? Where's my entry point? Doing that, and then going to a bunch of different retreats and festivals where I did a lot of healing with men. And all of a sudden I moved from being kind of like a man-hating lesbian to, oh my God, look at them. They're just beautiful babies. And I just want to also be in a space of seeing them as human as well. And so then just being an extremist and deciding, I'm going to go into a parlor, an establishment and going in there, and really it's not until you are in these types of experiences where you're doing kind of live work on yourself, live sex work. And also even the term, I believe people should become more normalized, just for the fact that everyone should be doing sex work. They should be doing work on their own sex or work in the sphere of sex. Like, we really need to just be getting rid of this label, even though I get to choose when I want to use it and when I don't, considering, because I'm not actually having sex with people. But I like to take the term to, destigmatize the industry.
It's same with mine. I am a sex worker. I don't have sex with people, but I am a sex worker. And it is, you're right. It's like, why do I need to even classify myself as a sex worker? I'm just a worker like everyone else.
Totally. And I guess for me, staying in that framework is helpful because it is so not regulated that I can just sort of make my own rules in a way. So yeah, I would say in terms of experiences, it's been the path itself. It's been going along the path itself that has helped me to be in the environments where I get to do those live shame work. That live shame work, for instance, if you're trying to do work in therapy, and don't get me wrong, it's amazing to be in those spaces and, so helpful. But the biggest thing, I think, when it has to do with sexuality is shame. I think that's one of the biggest blockers from our pleasure, as well as, stress and health and all those things. But shame is one of the biggest ones. And so really to be inside of this type of work and my path to where I am now, just being inside the body of work, being inside the parlor. And I remember even when I first started there, I said to all my friends, don't tell anyone that I'm here. Don't tell anyone that I'm doing this. Like, don't tell anyone. And I could feel the shame, that's not even mine. Society's, family, friends, what will the community think, all these things. And then, as the time goes on and you surround yourself more in these spaces, you see, wow, this is liberating. This is actually what's right. This is what's right, because you feel the magnitude of the freedom that you can feel inside of you when you get to transmute that. And when you realize how many more dimensions there are and how much stickiness is cluttering you from having what you really want in relationships and in your body.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Shame, I mean, I'd see it with my clients all the time. There's so much shame. I've said it before, probably, 85% of people who see me, I'm the only one who knows they're even submissive, which is one of the, founding principles of my brand was education, empowerment, and the third one was de-shame. I want to de-shame kink because I don't think people need to practice in silence. But it is so rooted in people from such young ages too, this shamefulness around sexuality. I remember, because with my daughter, I often read sometimes just things about parenting and how to raise children half decent, and I came across something about sexuality, and it was around masturbation, and it was about if you see your child masturbate, don't smack their hand away or don't do anything like that. Like if you're at home and they're just playing with it, just ignore it. If it's in public, just say, oh, look, that's something we kind of do at home in private, because obviously you might have some issues. But if it's at home, so, my daughter's had moments where she's there playing with herself when she's been very young. I'm sure at that point they don't even know what they're doing. All they know is it feels nice. And so many people have had probably the experience growing up where it's been shamed. And so from a very young age, pleasure equals shame. And then we wonder why we have problems with pleasure. What are some other issues you've seen maybe through your clients or even at the events that people are blocked with the pleasure aspect to themselves?
Yeah, I would say also definitely culturally and religiously, there's a lot of indoctrination, and people are feeling really afraid to be in those spaces. So that's definitely there. As well as that, mostly a lot of the time it's actually just people realizing that they never really felt safe in their bodies. That's, I'd say, the biggest thing. And, which makes sense because we've had things done to us. We've been shamed. We've been told it's wrong. We don't have any of these regulation tools. We don't have any rites of passage. We don't have anything cultivating us to even teach us about what our emotions are. We don't even know how to separate our emotions. All these things are the key to our innate power, our sexual power, our pleasure. Being in our bodies is actually where we reclaim our intuition, our power. That's the place where we can have everything that we want. But it's very difficult to be in our bodies. That's why we're coping. That's why we have addictions. That's why everyone is just stressed and burning out and all these things because they're not taking that time to be in their bodies. And it's hard to be because we've been, that they've been really traumatized. So a lot of the time, that is the main thing. And so a lot about Tendercore in my sessions is creating a reference point for people to see and feel safe, or as safe as they possibly can, to see what is possible in their bodies and fully give them a felt experience of what they can feel like, so that then they can take that download and then go and help that to shape then their needs and their desires. So a lot of the time it's people just desiring to feel safe or not even realize that they don't. As well as that, people not actually knowing their needs, I think, has been a really big one, especially more for women and queer people, where, again, you just have the role of, smile and nod and do things for other people.
People-pleasing.
People-pleasing is massive for everyone. It's also been my journey. And so people not knowing their needs because, not even knowing that they're allowed to have them. That's a big one. And, of course, just people also really learning to receive and not knowing how to do that. And, again, that is being able to feel safe and trusting with the people, with the surroundings, with your own body, to be able to surrender, to enjoy pleasure without feeling afraid.
Or having to give back. That's one that I've seen personally, especially with women and queer people, or just generally non-cis white males. And me and my husband was seeing a girlfriend. I actually have had this with 2 ex-girlfriends. I did the same experiment with them, where my partner, he gets such a good shout out for this on this show. He's very good at yoni massages, like mind-blowing. So I've said to them when we've been all together, okay, you just need to sit here with your eyes closed and do not do anything. And all you're allowed to think about is what you're feeling. If your mind wanders, you have to tell it to fuck off. Doesn't matter how many times you have to say it, get your mind back to just the feeling. And you can't think about time. It will probably take around 40 minutes. Don't think about time. Don't think about anything. And the amount of them that then try and start like wandering their hand onto you or onto him, or I'm like, no. You can't do anything other than just receive. It is so hard. Mm-hmm. It is incredible. I love doing that experiment because I'm like, why can't you just receive? Because we're not used to it.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's hard to have the attention on us. It's hard to, not engage. It's hard to feel that we are just truly worthy of just receiving without doing anything, because there's the whole nothing in life is free capitalist mentality as well, So I love that. Shout out hubby for being good at yoni massages. I think I'm quite good at them as well.
Yeah. What are some reactions, like really strong reactions or changes you've seen with clients or at events when they've experienced an embodiment practice and it's just completely changed their way of feeling or connecting with their body?
It is nothing short of profound. Like, I will toot my own horn and say that I am definitely a part of the touch revolution, because people come in extremely nervous and they leave feeling actually alive, like they've been asleep, basically, because they are put into spaces of feeling they get to be guided, they get to be told exactly how to be, they get to be softly encouraged, and they have so much permission in my spaces with just what I say, but also I do performances as well to help people to break down the barriers and just witness and see what comes up in their body and take away the pressure of needing to do or say or be anything. Really allows for the freedom to allow for whatever to be there. I would say that what I'm doing in the sessions and the power of erotic life force is an altered state. It's the same as a medicine journey. So people are having very profound experiences where I believe that they are skipping, years of talk therapy to be able to have these somatic downloads where it's a felt experience, so you can't unfeel it. So once that happens, I encourage them to follow then the aliveness that comes from that, so that they can start to be following their own intuition and following what feels good because they actually have that reference point now. So I would say so many things. It gives them something to follow, something to believe in, a connection to the sense of spirit, which I think a lot of people are missing and really craving in these times because we are so disconnected from culture and from land and from our sense of knowing that anything else is there, and it is, and we just have to feel it inside of us. So I'd say also a connection to spirit.
I definitely agree. Also, I think once you experience, once you know, you can't unknow. So I think that's, as you said, so once people kind of wake up, well, you can't, it's, you're there. But also the feeling of, I think people really struggle, and I've had this myself when I was going through trauma. I was having a very hard time sitting with myself and sitting with those feelings in my body. And for a while, I was struggling with heavy, maybe / nearly addiction with drugs. If it wasn't that, it was eating disorder. And it was all to do with not feeling what was happening inside of me. Mm-hmm. And I've seen an amazing psychotherapist for 9 years. I've also done psilocybin journeys with her, which have been the same thing. It's like turning on the lights. And she said, I'm not asking you to stop, but I'm asking you next time you're about to do it, sit and feel what you're feeling. And it was a slow journey. And so then I'd do that. I'd sit with it and I'd feel the uncomfortableness. And then even if I still did it, but it was like little baby steps. Okay, I'm feeling this. What am I feeling? What am I trying to hide with the use? Or what am I trying to hide with the binge? Or, what am I trying to like shove down? And then I find as I've sat more and more in myself and my body, I no longer do those behaviors. Mm. And I'm like, it really is, I think, probably one of the only ways I could see beating something like addictions or undesirable behaviors or things is really getting someone to sit inside their body and connecting to that spirit aspect. I don't think I would have been able to stop otherwise. Do you see that kind of thing as well?
Definitely. I mean, I've had a very colourful experience with addiction myself also, to cope, to not feel the feelings. And I think it's also because coming back to society doesn't tell us it tells us which feelings are desirable and which are not, And so to actually feel alive, we need to feel all of the feelings. We need to know what grief feels like. We need to know what pain feels like. We need to know what all these different things feel like to also have joy and also have feelings of ecstasy without ecstasy. So I think, like with what you're saying, it's actually getting familiar with your internal landscape and doing that healing from within, I think, is a gigantically potent, if not the most important part to everything, especially when it's done directly in the sex center or in those kind of more sticky areas of the shadow because, that's where we're born. That's where we come from. That's innately creation.
And there's so many beautiful, there's so much beauty in our shadows because I do a lot of work with shadow because a lot of people come to me and we're playing in that shadow work and it's about acceptance of the shadow. And I'm like, that's where your uniqueness comes from. That's what makes you you, and you're trying to suppress this beautiful thing and trying to get people to realize it, that the shadow shouldn't be suppressed. We need to play in it. So I love that. With the type of work you do, what are some misconceptions that people have?
So many. Well, definitely I think the misconceptions are that I'm having sex with people. That's definitely a misconception because, people go into fantasy, they don't know, like what we were saying before, everything is grouped together. Inside of that, I think that misconceptions are that, I'm just going to say that. Yeah.
It's funny because I always think, it's like sex or not sex. And then also I think sometimes I've had this conversation before with friends, there's such a high price put on sex, like penetrative sex.
Yep.
And that is not a service I provide. Yet I provide so many other services which took years of training, a shit ton of equipment, very high cost to do what I do. Yet people sometimes have a problem with it. Like, do you know what I mean? Because it's not full. And I'm like, why do people place such a high value on penetrative sex?
I know. Well, this is what's interesting about this, and I suppose comes back to the misconceptions in a way that, for me, again, it's never been, as a queer woman, it's never been about sex in terms of the intercourse. It's never been there. So everything has been about all of the parts in between and all of the other dimensions that you can do, because it's just not been there, you know. So I guess also lots of common misconceptions are also that sex, people just think that sex is sex, you know, and a lot about what I'm doing is trying to really reshape that. And I did a talk recently and it was on sensual massage as sex. Because for me, that's sex. Like, that is, honestly, it's better.
Yeah. Also, I think it doesn't always have to be about sex, which you've said. You know, as you said, we need to normalize touch to not just be sex. Also, we play with energy, and it's not always sexual. It's connection, it's intimacy, it's being close. And you know, even in my work, not everyone practices kink for sex reasons. There's a huge percentage of asexual people who practice kink. So how can you explain it being pure? Because a lot of people think it's just sex. Like that, they look at kink or BDSM, it's just sex. I'm like, 40% of people who practice BDSM do for stress relieving purposes. And one of my intake questions, even if it's a regular client, is where do you want to go today? Like with your head, like where do you want to go today? Is it you've had a really shit day of work and you want to just like completely forget about the day? Do you want an adrenaline rush? Like, where do you want to go? Because it's a journey with energy. We're going on in connection and we're doing that together. And that is so much more than just sex. And I think that is something people don't realize. So, but I think coming back to what you said at the beginning is we're not used to touch anymore, and we have made it so sexual touch. And because we have, or most people at some point probably have been touched against consent. You know, even my daughter actually a few weeks ago, I got a call from the school and she was at after school care and a boy had hit her on the bum. And they rang me to just let me know, and that they had spoken to the boy's parents. And I was like, you know, it's actually quite good that they're taking it seriously. There's a bunch of 7-year-olds. I know it wasn't probably a sexual act, but it is good that they took it seriously and the boy was kind of told this is not appropriate. And, you know, my daughter came home and obviously told me, and I just wanted to reinforce, you know, well, you know, people shouldn't be touching you inappropriately without your consent. But I think, you know, when I was young, it wasn't even, you wouldn't have had that conversation.
It's you know, it's difficult because I think children, sex and life force isn't different to them.
Yeah.
There's no, it's not split yet. It's not fragmented. It's not in the shadows. It's not been manifested into this, like, you know, darkness that we kind of see it as in society. So in ways, yes, it's great. In other ways, yeah, it might, I think everyone just needs to take it into their own hands.
It's interesting. We're trying to get consent into society because it hasn't been for so long. And then you're right, at kids, for them, it isn't sexual. So it's like, where is the fine line between these things, between teaching them? And also my struggle also is, you know, when is appropriate to start teaching those things? I think it is good to teach ownership of bodies because there's so much things. I think I'm reading a book at the moment, and they said 1 in 4 people were assaulted as children. Maybe even less. This was based on the States. So it is very prevalent, you know, things happening when people are young. So you do need to teach it at a young age. But you're right, children don't always look at things, especially between themselves, as sexual, which I think is interesting. I noticed in one of the feedbacks to your event, and you actually mentioned this earlier, about feeling softer. And I loved this because after my first psilocybin journey I did with my therapist, during the journey, that word came up for me. I love being soft. And then I went to a sound healing event with my best girlfriend a few weeks ago for the last full moon. And I'm like, oh, what came up for you? She's never done any psychedelics. She's like, I felt this need to be softer. And I'm like, what is with this word coming up all the time, especially from, again, non-cis white men, that word is coming up a lot. Softness. And I'm assuming it's coming up in your work as well. Why do we not feel soft anymore?
Oh my God, because if we are soft out in the world, we will get ripped to shreds. If we are out there and we don't put our armor on, we're going to get pillaged, you know? Like, again, the world, with the cost of living, with our expectations of how we should be, with people not wanting to get hurt, it's kind of this like dog eat dog, you know, hardening that people need to do to be out there, to be able to provide for their families, to be able to not get pushed around, to not get violated, to, you know, make money. All of these things we need to toss the softness aside. We can't be in that, you know, in that nurturing space. We can't, it's harder for us to be in that space because, you know, we might get taken advantage of. And so creating spaces where we can be in that and where we remember to be in that. And even if we have to go put a mask on to go to our fucking corporate job, then that softness, at least that can exist somewhere. And I'm sure that that's what you also see in your sessions. And that's what I was seeing in a lot of my sessions when I used to work specifically also with men. It would be like they would walk in with all this armor and all of this manliness that they've told that they need to have. They would come into the space and they would just melt. They would melt because they would have the permission to be able to be in their feminine, to be able to, it's not even feminine. It should be in any part of an innate people. We have all of them.
Well, that's the thing. People think feminine and masculine energies is female, male. It's not. It's got nothing to do with it. They're just qualities, and each we have both in us. But I was the same, especially when I was in corporate. I was in my masculine so much. And even when I started doming, I found I was doming from my masculine at the beginning. And I kind of, after I had my energy meltdown, I was like, I like to be in my feminine. Mm-hmm. I'm actually naturally happiest when I'm in my feminine, because I was coming home stuck in my masculine, and I'm like, I'm in this. It was just I could feel it. And now I switched it and I dom from my feminine.
Yeah.
Now there's nothing wrong with doming from your masculine.
No,
but I like it. It's soft. It's how I like to be. And you're right, especially with my male clients, they come in. They just want to let go. They just want to take it off, take the suit off or whatever it is, you know, metaphorically, and be vulnerable and be soft. And their feminine characteristics, it doesn't mean you're any less of a man, you know. But
yeah, I also I was calling myself a soft dom for a while as well, because I definitely do a lot of that in my spaces, and it comes very much from this kind of mother lover dom energy that I'm kind of in. Where the soft dom also takes away a lot of the scariness of going to see someone, where it's like somebody is not actually afraid to just hold you and give to you and stroke you and be in closeness with you. And a lot of the time I think that it's that softness that we've been missing.
I mean, it's so powerful, you know, in my sessions to put skin to skin contact with someone, put your arms around them and breathe.
It's literally what I do for 50% of my sessions is lay on someone and breathe on them, and I call it babe weight.
Yeah. I often will put them at the beginning of the session, often on the cross. I will come up behind them and I will put my arms around them, put them on their belly and do big belly breaths together and have my head right next to theirs or my chin on their shoulder. It is so powerful. You can feel people drop in.
Because you're also just co-regulating, you know, and that comes back to the tribe and co-regulating and back to just us being out in our heads and confused and not having the tools. And then someone has that soft dom energy to come in, that nurturing energy to come in and be like, I'm not afraid of you. Like, we are human and you deserve this because you're human. Let's connect in this deep experiential way.
It's so beautiful. I wanted just to finally ask, what are some challenges that you faced in advocating for queer-focused intimacy and pleasure? Or have there been any?
I'd say, firstly, just advocating for any pleasure education or sexuality stuff is just screams shadow banning. So generally, even just without the queer stuff, it's been very difficult to figure out how to navigate getting this work to the people, you know, to the people that needs to be, you know, with. So straight up, just even though we think that it's growing and we are becoming more open around all of it, which we are, it's also still very difficult to get your work across. And I think that's what a lot of people in our industry really face. And I'm really looking forward to someone who just creates something to fix all of that, because I'm on board. When it comes to this, I would say what I really want to share is that, yes, I'm targeting queer people and women and people who identify with that. But I also feel like there's this really big gap between people who identify as straight or straight presenting and queer people, I think. And then there's probably the sex scene is probably like in between. Maybe it's this like alternative scene. But what I've been finding is, straighter people don't feel like they belong in the queer scene, or they don't want to take the label, or they don't, well, I'm not that queer, so I won't go there. And same with queer people, just actually feeling innately maybe non-binary, but also just wanting to date someone that is of the opposite sex, or it doesn't present as, queer. So what I really want to do, and what has been something that has been sticky that I want to figure out, is creating more spaces for those in-betweeners, for those people who want to experiment, and that this type of work is not actually just for queer people, it's for anyone. I've just been targeting that area because a lot of the values are really queer. But I really want to help people to queer their lens. And I want to also break down queerness so it's not scary. For instance, I think the world would be a better place if more men just had butt play,
100%.
I was just waiting to watch your face when I dropped it. I'm like, just going to fucking love this. But, and innately, so many men are afraid of that because they straight away just think, I'm not gay, And so it's like, okay, well, yeah, that could be that, just doing that and having no labels around that, having anything to do with queerness, I think is much more of a digestible space for people to be able to access that. So I want to really play around with what is queer, what is not in this kind of space, because I actually just innately think that all of this work is for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's been something that I want to push through and what I've realized in trying to work in this queer-centered way is that it's not actually just for queer people. It's just about queering the lens.
I take a very similar approach with my business, and kink is not just for people in the kink lifestyle, it's for everyone. That's why my approach has been like vanilla kink, or people curious about kink and you can learn it, because I'm like, you don't need to be like a dark-haired 6-foot dungeon master to get involved in kink. Everyone can get involved to it. And the point is, the principles, as you said, the principles of the queer community, the principles of the kink community are beautiful principles that can be applied to everyone and your life in general. You answered a little bit of this already, but I wanted to ask you, what do you envision as the future of Tendercore and its impact on the community?
Tendercore is literally changing lives. Tendercore is fully opening up group experiences where people can do healing in lifetime. So it's a softcore intimacy play party where instead of just going around in your narrative, you actually get to come and in lifetime be able to unravel your conditioning. And so Tendercore is literally just been birthed, but is already growing faster than what I can keep up with. And it's really just a spirit that I'm kind of listening to, that I'm bolstering around, that I'm like at, the whilm of. So I think that it's going to, I hope that it happens in all different versions, as often as possible, different versions that can help different people with different accessibility, different levels of trauma, smaller, bigger, bringing it really to places so that people can actually just, taking away sex and taking away pleasure, actually just learn how to regulate. Because that's actually a lot of what Tendercore is, because a lot of the principles inside of it are innately just nurturing parts that we've had as humans that our mother has given to us, or our father, or, so actually at the end of the day, Tendercore is about learning how to regulate, learning about your own emotions, learning about what you desire and what your needs are. So I think it's a whole other school of thought that we have been skipped that if anything right now is exactly the time where it needs to be alive, because as the world becomes more chaotic and we just have more grief coming at us from every angle, we're going to need to learn how to be okay, learn how to be with those sticky feelings, and we're going to need to really know a lot about how we operate and to regulate ourselves and, of course, regulate with each other, because we need to be in this all together.
Yeah, that is absolutely beautiful. I absolutely love the work you're doing. It is very inspiring. It is very to the core of how I believe the world should be. And I think it's amazing what you're doing. Pimp yourself out. Where can people find you, connect with you, Instagram? What's the best way?
Cool. So, yeah, I've got my website, which is tendercore.com.au. I've got my own personal Instagram, which is the Quinn Kush, and then the Tendercore, which is also the Instagram for the business. Reach out and get a sensual massage pleasure artistry session, get a package, come to one of the portals, reach out if you want to do a collab, have a sexy photo shoots. And that's that. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I loved chatting to you, and we'll definitely keep in touch for more future chats.
Yes, thank you.
And to everyone at home, as always, stay kinky.